B'tvach, we are on Daf Yud Daled Amud Beis. We're learning as a chus for Shleima Filan Chai Bas Serach and Shira Bas Shalamis. We're about 10 lines from the bottom. Ibayalahu. New question. If someone, so we like as we said, there are 4 avodas hadam in a carbon. Shchita, Kabbalah, Halacha, and Zrika. Halacha is after the dam goes into a kli sharas, the kohen conveys it in a kli to the mizbeach to do the zrika. So this halacha, what if it happens instead of the kohen gadol walking along? The kohen walking with it, he does it in a sitting position. It means he just stretches out his arms and carries it while sitting, without walking. Halacha has a mashmayis of walking. What if he does it without walking? Is it called halacha or lo shma halacha? So there's going to be a lot of different nafkaminas. Rashi mentions a couple of them. Shma halacha is like Rashi paslava machshava l'rabbanon. We had the machlekes Rabbanon and Rav Shimon about whether halacha, if it's not necessary, is it going to pass? According to Rabbanon that say halacha is going to pass if you have a machshava shalai l'shma during the halacha. Will that even be the case where it's a halacha of without walking, just in one place? Ayimasa zar psula. Another nafkamina would be, this is going to be somewhat controversial later on in the Gemara, but at this point we're saying if a zar does it, was it an avoida that it's not? If the zar moved it by passing it along closer to the mizbeach, is that an illegal halacha that's not yaitze the chi of halacha? Or Rashi says, continues, lo shma halacha v'lo pasla machshava, that but machshava doesn't pass. Okay, so that's, but we can just think in our minds, is the halacha that's not done with walking, is that a real halacha or not? The gabi the dinim of the avodas hadam of halacha. Toshma, bring a right. V'chein yosh. So we brought a brisa on the top of the at the back, the end of the last in the top of this one. V'chein yosh, v'chein smoil, pasul. We said a zar and all different types of people, an oinin, they're all pasul if they do a avodas hadam. We also said someone who's sitting, or someone who does it with his left hand. So it's mashma yoshev. Yoshev is somebody who's sitting, and he moves it because he's yoshev. The problem is you have to be standing when you do the avodah. That's going to be the first, in the first mishnah of the next parak. We're going to talk about all the psulim, all the things that the kohen has to do when he's doing the avodah. So one of them is he has to be standing. Because he's sitting apostles. That's mashma. Yoshev kasher. It's mashma. The only problem with someone who's yoshev, obviously, the Gemara assumes someone who's sitting is not moving his feet. He's not moving along. So it's mashma that the only problem is that he's sitting. But if he was standing and he did it in the same way as sitting without moving, it would be kasher. So that seems to indicate that halacha shalei b'regel is a avodah. So no. Dilma yoshev the kashayif meishev. Maybe when he's sitting, it's talking about when he's scrabbling along. As he's sitting, he's pushing himself along closer to the mizbeach. So he's actually moving. So the only problem is the yoshev, not the lack of movement. And oimid dumya the yoshev denied put. And when he's standing, what would be the equivalent case by oimid would also be where he's shuffling his feet along. So he's staying in one place. He's not actually walking. But that still would be that case would be a halacha. But maybe if he didn't move at all, he just passed it along in his hands, it would not. Toshmas, another raya. Shachat Yisrael. If where is this? This is, I think, in Psachim. Yeah. Shachat Yisrael, the kibel hakoyin. The Yisrael shechted the zar. The zar can shecht a carbon, and he's allowed to do the first avodah. The kibel hakoyin, the koyin does the kabbalah. Nafnu l'chavera, in the way they would do it by the carbon pesach, is the kohen would then pass it along to his friend, and then that kohen to the next chaver, like the fireman brigade, where they pass things along. So you see, nobody's walking, everyone's just passing. So you see halach shel beregel l'shmoy halacha. So Gemara hasam nami denied dipurta. It's talking about where they're moving a little bit. It's like tomorrow my kamash one. So then why are we saying this if this is a totally regular halacha where they're each walking a little bit? Why is it telling you? It's coming to tell you that they were ma'adif to do it this way, this was the preferred way to do the Korban Pesach, to involve as many Kohanim as possible, to have B'Roiv Am Hadrus Melech. So we've brought two rayas. We try to bring two rayas that Kabbalah Haylacha Shaloi Beregel is considered a good Haylacha, and we slugged up both of those rayas. Now we want to bring a raya the other way around. Tashma Kibel HaKosher V'Nasan L'Pasul. This is a Mishnah later on in Daf Lamed Beis. If the Kayin was Makabel the dam in a cleave, and Nasan L'Pasul, then he gave it to someone who's not a Kayin, or not a kosher or Kayin. Yachzer L'Kosher. He has to bring it back to the Kayin, who and then do the Haylacha from there. So you see that when he gave it to the apostle, and the apostle carried it along, that was no good, and you have to bring it back to where the kosher was in order to do a kosher Haylacha. And this is also going to be controversial in the next Gemara, not controversial. The Gemara is going to discuss whether after you did a illegitimate Haylacha, if it can then be corrected by doing a legitimate one. But in any case, you see that the Haylacha Shaloi, over here we're talking about where he was Nasan L'Pasul, and we say you have to be Yachzel L'Kosher, even though there's no mention of walking. So you see that that when he gives it, he's saying the dam, from the fact that you're saying that the dam has to go back, it has to go back to the person who's kosher. So it shows you that the Haylacha is not considered a Haylacha, because if it was a good Haylacha, then you were not, even though the Kayin was the one who gave it over to the person who's not kosher. So he's the one who moved it over. So why do you have to go back and give it back to that Kayin? Why don't you just have another Kayin take it from where this Kayin dropped it off? Vice does that handing it over by the original Kayin was not a valid Haylacha. So you see that Haylacha Shalei Beregel is not a good Haylacha. So Gemara, Ema Yachzer HaKosher V'Yekablo. What it means is, no, not that you give it back to the original Kayin, but the kosher, instead of Yachzer L'Kosher, it's Yachzer HaKosher. The kosher Kayin now takes it from the apostle and continues. But Ein Hanami, that first Haylacha of the original Kayin who handed it to the apostle guy, that's fine. That was a good Haylacha. And now basically the apostle is doing a Maisa Itztava. It's like you put it down on a counter, and then another Kayin resumes taking it.
What's the difference between what we thought originally and now?
Before we said Yachzer L'Kosher. That means you have to go backwards. Whatever the original Kayin had passed it, that has to be undone, because it was a Halacha Shalei Beregel. Now I'm saying, no, wherever he put it down, he gave it to a apostle, a non-Kayin, or a Kayin who's Pasal Avaida, then in order to continue, someone else has to take it from that Kayin, but you don't have to bring it back to where it was originally.
Wouldn't that prove that it's not a Haylacha as well?
No, Adarab, that proves it was a Haylacha. It means the Haylacha that already was made when the first Kayin
you're saying that in other words,
was a kosher Haylacha. Now you have to continue doing the rest of the Haylacha. Amru Lam Rabbi Yochanan, Halacha Shaloi Beregel Lo Yishma Haylacha. Ula said b'shem Rabbi Yochanan that the conclusion of this question, we weren't able to bring a raya one way or the other. His conclusion is that it's not a Haylacha. Now the question is, Efshel L'Tekuna Lo Efshel L'Tekuna. If you did this Haylacha, someone, in spite of the fact that it's not a Haylacha, the Kayin passed it along without walking. Can you go back and fix what was done, or did that Haylacha Psula passel the whole carbon? That means, Sagt Gemara, Tashma. We bring a raya from what we said. Kibel HaKosher v'nasan l'pasel yachzel l'kosher. We said before, this previous brisa, this Mishnah later on, that we said if the Kayin passed it to someone who's apostle, the kosher was mekabelit and give it. Then he has to go back yachzer lekosher. He has to go back and bring it back to the kosher. Even though we explained before that it's not a raya about the original question of whether the truth is that halach shaleb regla shma halacha or not shma halacha. This is all going in the tzad that it's lo shma halacha, and that we were trying to say was a raya that it's lo shma halacha, but that's not necessarily a raya from there because we said that it could be it's talking about yachzer kosher. But Isa Kadaitach lo yasher liskuna ifsala ifsala. Yeah, if you hold that you can't be misakin, what does it help that you're saying that we're saying that the kosher goes and takes it from him, but it was already no good. So if you hold that you can't be misakin, what does it help to have that that it was a good halacha and then have the kayin continue doing it? If you hold it's not efshar to me misakin, if we are saying that we hold that kabbalah halach shalai beregel is no good and therefore you have to return it. Okay, so we're not going with this teretz that you gave before. But what does it help to return to where it was if we say that you can't be misakin what was done before? So like the Gemara, no. Misavras the koi zor gavoy. We're not talking about where b'chlal. We're talking about a case here where the zor was not closer to the mizbeach. Loi the koi zor b'roi. So when you gave it to the zor, it was not at all a halacha at all. It was going the other way. It was going away from the mizbeach. So it wasn't a halacha shaloi beregel that's psula. It wasn't a halacha at all. So therefore, it doesn't need a tikkun because there was no halacha. Itmar Amar Ulam Rabbi Yochanan halach shaloi beregel psula. We said b'shem Ula said b'shem Rabbi Yochanan halach shaloi beregel he paskin was psula. That's what we said in the bottom of the yam. Amalei afshel l'sukuna. The Gemara says from the fact that he says this lashon halach shaloi beregel psula after. We had already said before, we said lo shma halacha. Now we have this member that he said that it's psula, vice dice that he held it was puzzle. This lashon of puzzle was coming to tell you that it's not efshta to be misakin it. He asked the kasha on this conclusion that halach shalai beregel is loishra halacha, and it's not efshar to misakin. Nishrach menakli ala ritzpa. This is a Gemara later on, and again on that same blot on Daf Lamed Beis. If after the Kabbalah the kayin dropped, he spilled the dam from the kli onto the floor, va'asfu, and then he picked it up, kosher. That dam is kosher. So, but the problem is, what does it help to be ma'asaf the gam, to gather the dam, when you pour it on the floor? Some of the dam, l'chayra, went toward the mizbeach. So it had a halacha shalei beregel, which we are saying is not able to be misaken. So how could you regather it and use it, but it should have become puzzle because of halacha shalei beregel, which is not able to be misaken. So Gemara, we're talking about where the dam spilled away from the mizbeach, not toward the mizbeach, so there was no halacha shalei beregel. So Gemara lebroi nafik l'gavoy lo'ayil. How could that be that you spill it and everything goes only in one direction? When you spill, it makes a mess. It goes in all directions. So Gemara, a bunch of turrets. In B'makam Madrin, it was a slope so that it all went in one direction. Or there was a hole in the ground that it all fell down the hole. It didn't have any room to move toward the mizbeach. It's talking about dam that was it was thickened. It got kolish. It solidified. So when it fell, it just stayed in one place. It didn't spread out, and it didn't go closer to the mizbeach. Is that what the Tana was coming to tell us? That it's telling you this din, and it's only in this very specific one of these cases that the dam couldn't go in the direction of mizbeach? It doesn't seem likely that that's what we're talking about. We have another memra, another mishnah, a little bit later. Nishbach ala ritzba. If the dam came straight, this is a slightly different case than the last one. The last one was talking about where the dam fell out of a kli. The dam went from the behema into the kli and then spilled. Over here we're talking about it went straight from the behema onto the floor. That means when you shechted the behema, the dam went on the floor. V'osvu, and they gathered it up, pasul. We say it's pasul. And the reason is because it didn't have the Kabbalah, so you can't have, it's not a kosher Kabbalah. But what Gemara says, liftlig v'didei. Why does it have to say nishbech ala ritzba that it came directly from the behema? When do we say that it's kosher if you gather it up when it fell from the kli, when it went away from the mizbech? Pasul, let's say. So why do we have to say this case of nishbech from directly from the behema? Let's say two cases where it was nishbech from the kli. If we hold that whenever it goes toward the mizbech, it's going to be pasul. Tiyoftu. Gemara says it's taka a good kasha. So this would seem to indicate that efshalasak. Itmar haylacha shalai beregel machlekes Reb Shimon v'Rabban. We wanted to say this haylacha shalai beregel is the machlekes between Reb Shimon and Rabban. And now the Gemara is going to try to say this is the right. Reb Shimon was the man the Amar in our Mishnah who said that the haylacha, since it could be dispensed with, it's not, you could shech the animal right near the mizbech, so you don't always have to have haylacha. So he said haylacha is not going to be ma'akev if you have a machshavas shaloi lishma. Now I want to say that this machlokes of Rosh Hashanah Rabban is going to be also relevant as machlokes of haylacha shaloi beregel, when haylacha happened without walking. So the first attempt at this is to say by halachas rabsi de kol yamalei pligi de psula. By a haylacha where the kayin walked, went a distance, meaning not a haylacha regel, but I'm sorry, not a haylacha shaloi beregel, but a regular haylacha. Everyone will agree that it's possible, which the Gemara is going to ask in a minute. That in our Mishnah we said Rav Shimon holds that a regular halacha is not possible because he holds that since you could avoid it, it's not going to possible. But this is what the Gemara is trying to say. Ki pligi b'halacha zutrasi. The machlokes between Rav Shimon and the Rabbanan is by halacha shaloi beregel. Well, he just passed it with his hands. Mechkol alai b'marava. They asked, they laughed at this in the West, in Eretz Yisrael. They said, "How could you say that's the machlokes of Shimon and the Rabban? If you say that halacha zutrasi, Rav Shimon holds is not a halacha that could be pasul with a machshava shelo shma. L'chatas ha'oif the psula ba machshava l'Rav Shimon heichei mishkachas la. How are you going to have a chatas ha'oif? The chatas ha'oif, they would do kmitz on it. They would take the oif and spritz it. They would wave the bird, and by waving the bird toward the mizbeach, the dam would come directly out of the neck of the bird onto the mizbeach. And we know that Rav Shimon says there is a din. We have limudim later on that tell us that chatas oif machshava shaloi lishma pasels. How are you ever going to have a machshava shaloi lishma in this oif? Either chashav Allah mekami delepuk dam loy klomi. If you're talking about that, as he's shaking the bird toward the mizbeach, that's the halacha. We just said according to Rav Shimon, halacha shalei beregel is loishma halacha. V'basa denafik dam, and if you're going to say after the dam goes out, is avdabam le mitzvah. So the Gemara assumes at this point that the dam, he already finished his avodah once the dam leaves the neck of the bird, and the rest of it he already finished whatever he's doing. Sagt the Gemara, no. My question, Dilma with the parish v'adamat mizbeach. Maybe the avodah is still going on while the blood is traveling, because that's still considered part of his zrika, and that's why you can have a machshava shalei lishma. Even if Rav Shimon holds that halacha shalei beregel is lishma halacha, but this is going to still be considered his zrika as long as the blood is traveling toward the mizbech. The Ba'amine Rav Yirmiyah Reb Zera Hayamaza. This is a very strange medical situation. The person was being mazah the dam, the nokta yada shel mazah, and as the blood was heading toward the mizbeach, the hand of the person who threw it got cut off as it was in the air. Very strange situation. I think there'd be a lot of blood flying around from this. And I think everyone would have bigger concerns other than the kashas of this behemoth, this guy's hand and the flying around. So before the dam reached the mizbeach, Mao. What's the din on that? Do we say someone who has a cut off hand is not a kosher, he's a bal mum, his avodah is not kosher? Do we say that this avodah was pasul? Amalei psula. It's pasul. My time hazav and asabina. Because the Torah says v'hiza. The pasuk says the tavel hakohen es etzbay badam v'hiza min adam. He should dip his fingers into the dam and he spritzes from the dam sheva pam l'nei Hashem es pnei haparech es hakodesh v'nosan hakodesh min adam al karnus in his back, and he has to put it. So the fact that the Torah says v'hiza v'nosan, the avodah is not done until the dam reaches the mizbeach. So therefore, if the kohen's hand got cut off before the dam reached the mizbeach, then that avodah was not done with the kosher kohen. So you see, unlike what we had assumed in our question, that we said that as soon as the dam leaves the bird, back to a case not with a cut off hand, but a person spritzing a bird, that we said how you're going to have an avodah that machshava is going to passel. As long as the dam is traveling to the mizbeach, it's still part of the zrika, and that could be where you have a machshava shalei shma. So there's no raya connected our assumption that halach shalei beregel is lo shema halacha. Kiaser a papa of Huna Breder of Yeshua mibei Rav Armi hainu chucha. This is what the problem was with the explanation that we were trying to say of what the machlokes were in the Rabban. This is like we said before. Are we saying that Rav Shimon does not argue in a case where the kohen is actually doing walking and doing it the regular way? Our Mishnah explained very clearly the reason for Rav Shimon is because as he's walking, since it's not going to be a good halacha because he could have dispensed with it. Had he shechted the animal right near the Zevachim, he wouldn't have had to walk. Elamai, everyone's going to agree that it's not going to be puzzle when you do when there's different explanations in the Rishonim, but the pashas of the Gemara is if you do a machshava shaloi lishma during a halacha shaloi beregel, since it's not an avodah, it won't pass. Ki pligi by halacha rapsi. Okay. Halichai zok the Gemara. Halichai zar. What happened if a zar was meilech the dam, which he's not allowed to do, right? We're gonna prove soon in the next parak that the avodas have to be done other than shechita. They all have to be done by a kohen. What happened if a zar did it? Lichzira kohen, and then the kohen brought it back to he undid what the zar did because of halichai, and then he went and did it again. They argue about what's it then? Have you resuscitated this halacha? Which is really the machlekes the question that we just said. The one who says it's kosher says you can be masakin the non-working, the illegitimate halacha that was done by the zar, and the other one says no, you did it wrong. It's too late, and it's possible forever. So what about the other way around? If the kohen was meilech the dam, and then he brought it back to where it was before, and then he brought it, then a zar was meilech it. That means he covered over he brought it 10 feet, the kohen brought it 10 feet, then he brought it back to where it started, and then the zar brought it down those 10 feet. It's going to depend, according to the Mandam who says it goes by the first halacha. That means that if the zar first brought it, it's going to be possible, even if the kohen brings it back. So he'll say over here, since the kohen was the one who did it first, and that's the only thing we care about, it's going to remain kosher, even though later on a zar did it. And according to the Mandamar who said that it's possible that it's kosher where a zar first brought it, and then the kohen went and did the second bringing, so we only care about the second one. So even though the kohen brought it the first one, it's going to be possible over here. Rava says no. Even according to the Mandam who said in the case where the zar first did it and then the kohen did it, it's possible. He would still agree in the case where the kohen did it first and then you brought it back and then the zar did it, that it's going to be possible. Right? We did it backwards. My timer. The tzarech lam tuyeh. Because you still have to, although the first halacha is important, the second, now that you placed it in a position where it has to be brought to the mizbeach, that's also important. It's not that just one of the bringings is important. Anytime you're bringing the dam to the mizbeach, that has to be done by your kohen. Amalei Rav Yirmi Rav Ashi Hachi Amar Rav Yirmi Midifti. Hatzarach lam tuya. This svara of whether taking it back is also considered to be an avodah that can't be done by a zar. Machlekes Rabbi Lazar v'Rabbanan. So machlekes Rabbi Lazar and the Rabbanan d'Tnan. Rabbi Lazar Omer hamahalach b'makom shetzarich lahalach. This is back to our Mishnah, the mysterious end of our Mishnah that we didn't understand what Rabbi Lazar said. Rabbi Lazar said hamahalach b'makom shetzarich lahalach machshava peiselis. Someone who's going in a place that he has to go, the machshava is paisel. Makom she'ein tzarich lahalach ein machshava peiselis. It's not going to pass. Sounds a little bit like what Rav Shimon had said. Everyone will agree that if he was makabel the dam b'chutz, meaning further away from the mizbeach, and then he brought it close to the mizbeach, that's a hilach shetzarach lahalach, meaning between Rebbe Lazar and the Rabbanan. Now we're not talking about Rav Shimon. Don't mix that up. In between, they would both agree that's shetzarach lahalach. Kiblu b'fnim v'yitzia l'chutz. But if he took it close to the mizbeach and he went it further, that's going to be a hiluch that doesn't need to be done, and everyone would agree that that's not going to be considered a halacha. Where he brought it close to the mizbeach and then brought it further away. Now, when you're going to bring it the second time, which is really what we are discussing this question. So since now you bring it again, that's considered a hiluch, meaning Rebbe Lazar would say that's a tzarech lam tuya. I'm sorry, the Rabbanan would say it's still going to be a good halacha, and if you have machshava shalai lishma would pass during that halacha. And the other man lav ki hiluch tzarech lavoid dami, since it was already done one time, the second time is not going to pass. Someone who's going on makom shetzarich lahalach, mashavas peiselis, ketzad kiblu b'chutz v'echnisu lefnim zeu hilach shetzarich lahalach, kiblu b'fnim v'yitzil l'chutz zilach she'ein tzarich leilach, v'chazav v'echnisu hilach shetzarich lahalachu. But the mashmois from that, you could be medayik from that. So when he says kiblu b'fnim v'yitzil l'chutz, it's a hilach she'ein tzarich leilach, smash. But if he then goes and brings it ifnim, that's a hilach shetzarich lahalach, and a machshava would pass. Amalei Tanya says if you have a brisa that says specifically that's Rebbe Lezer holds, I have to be maskim that Rebbe Lezer would say on that it is considered a hiluch hatzarach lahalach that would pass. Okay, what time is it? 8:58. What time did we start? We started 8:25. I think we could start the next Mishnah for a minute so we can get to the. We don't have to finish at least a block. Zok the Mishnah. Kol Zevachim shekiblu daman zar. Someone, any case where we had said in the first Mishnah we talked about shchita. Now we're talking about the other avodas. Kol Zevachim shekablu daman, that you makabel a daman. That means also halacha and zrika as well. A zar, someone who's not a kayin. An einen, someone who has a mace. He's mourning a mace from that day. Tful yom. Tful yom is someone who is a lower level. He's not a full tameh. He already did the tefillah, but he hasn't waited for the end of the day when he's going to be fully tar. Mechusar kippurim, some types of tameim like a Motzei and I think was a Tumas later maybe. Forgot there were two types of people, a Zav and a Motzei, I'm sorry, that even after they taiveled and they waited for nightfall, they still have to bring a carbon to be fully tar. So Kayin who was in that state, a Mechusar begadim, a Kayin who's not, doesn't have all of his begadim, Shalerachat Yadayim Raglayim, a Kayin who didn't wash his hands and feet in the Kiyar, an Arel who didn't get a Milah, Tameh if he's a full Tameh. It's just including that because obviously if it's full Yaim and Mechusar Kippurim are going to be possible, then a Tameh is also going to be possible. Wasn't taivel at all. Yoshev if he's sitting, Ayman al Gabi Kalim. If the Kain was standing on top of Kalim, as we all know, the Kahanim, you're not Kahanim, but we're all worried about this when it's going to be the time of the Beis HaMikdash. They have to keep fires going because you're not allowed to wear anything on your feet. You have to go in bare feet. So they would warm up the cold stone. But they certainly weren't allowed to wear shoes or any Kalim on their feet. Agabe Behema, or going on top of Behema while they do the Avodah. Agabe Ragle Chaveri, even if he's standing on the regal of another Kain. Puzzle. All these things are puzzle. Kibul b'smoil, if he accepted the avoid, if he, let's say, did the Kabbalah, he accepted the dam from the behema in a klisharis with his left hand, puzzle. If Shimon machshir, Shimon says it's pasha, it's going to be kasha. So Gemara, zar minalan. Where do we know that a zar who does the avodah is puzzle? The Tani Levi, Dabra al Aram vel Bonav Lemar, v'yenazru mikadshe b'nei Yisrael. The whole pasuk is This is talking about that the Kohanim have to stay away from Tumah. So it says when they're Tumah, they have to they should separate themselves from Kodshe B'nei Yisrael. What does it say Kodshe B'nei Yisrael? What does it say V'yenazru mikachim? B'nei Yisrael lemutei mai. What is the word from the Kodshem of B'nei Yisrael? Even lemutei nashim. If it's coming to say that which we say that Kain has to separate himself from doing avodas when he's tamei is only for men, but if he's bringing a carbon of a woman, then he could do it when he's tamei. Carbon nashim betuma karav. That doesn't make any sense. How could you say such a thing that you're allowed to bring the carbon of a woman when he's tamei? It's almost like hard to understand why the Gemara suggested something and just said that's impossible. We're not really even giving a reason. We're just saying it's not. There's no sense to it. Maybe it means to exclude, it says B'nai Yisrael, it's coming to exclude that when you bring the carbon of Ovid Kechavim are allowed to bring voluntary Nedavas to the Beis HaMikdash as a carbon. But we're saying that could be brought by Kain when he's Tamei. The tzitz is meratza. We're talking over here about where the Kain is Tamei. But the tzitz is meratza, that if you bring a carbon and the dam or the emurim become tamei, the tzitz is meratz and allows you to continue to eat that doesn't passel the carbon. So, but that's only true by Yisrael. The tzitz is not meratz; it doesn't allow the carbon to continue when the dam, for example, became tamei for a guy. The Amar Mar ba'avdei bein b'shoig le'mezid lo'hurtza. So that the tzitz is not meratz on the tumah of the dam of a carbon, but tumah karav. And now you're going to say that the other way around. But when a avid kechavim brings a carbon, then the kain is allowed to do it while he himself is tamei. We know that avid kechavim are more chamer legabi the din of tzitz being meratza on the dam of the carbon becoming tamei. So how could we say they're going to be more kuladik that the kain can bring it when he's tamei? Elachi kamer. So we have to read the pasuk differently. V'yenazru mikache. V'yenazru mikache. B'nei Yisrael v'lo yichalalu. So we cut up the word. The Rashi, you see, Rashi cuts it up. Elachi kamer. V'yenazru mikache. Yisrachu b'tomei kol kachim. A kayin whose tamei has to stay away from all kachim. And then we say B'nei Yisrael lo yichalu. V'azara mafhem yenazru k'dei shel yichalu. Because Bnei Yisrael have to stay away. They themselves have to stay away from doing the avoid. The Be'er Rabbi Shmuel, Tana Rabbi Shmuel says a different source for this din. So that's the first shot in where we know that a zar can't do avoid. The Rabbi Shmuel Tana Asher b'kal v'chayim b'al mum. Learn as a kabbalah from a balmum. Ma balmum sha'eichel. A kohen who's a balmum is allowed to eat the karbanos. He's allowed to eat the kachim. He's not precluded from eating. But in Ovid Chilal, if he'll do the avodah, a kohen who's a balmum is not allowed to do the avodah. Zar she'ena oichel. A zar who's not allowed to eat at all. He certainly can't eat kachim. He's not allowed to eat. He's only allowed to eat kachikalim. Ein edim shem Ovid Chilal. Certainly, if he's going to do the avodah, he's going to be mechal it. He's going to pass the carbon. So Gemara, no, you can't learn that from balmum. Mal balmum shechasa by karv kamakriv. Balmum has its own chumrah. The reason why a kohen who's a balmum can't do the avodah is because if the animal is a balmum, that also passes the carbon. So there's a special element to balmum, a chumrah, that a balmum doesn't only apply to the kohen, it also applies to the animal. So that's the reason why by a balmum, the by kohen is a balmum can't do it, but maybe a zar could do it. So Gemara Tamei Yechiach. I'll prove it from a Tamei. A Tamei, there's no such thing that is the karv kamakriv, and yet a Tamei can't bring a carbon. So Gemara and a Tamei, yeah, Ma'al Tamei shechemetama. Maybe the chumrah of a Tamei is that he can cause other people to become Tamei. So maybe that's the reason why he can't do the avodah. Balmum Yechiach. You want to learn from Balmum and from Tamei. That there's an azhara that they can't do the avodah. If they do the avodah, it passes. And the Gemara asks the obvious question. We're trying to learn out that if a zar does the avodah, he's mechalet. It passes it. But the Gemara now is assuming that there was already a hazhara that someone who's a balmum and someone who is tamei is muzar from doing the avodah. Minolam the muzar. Where do we see that there's a hazhara for a balmum and a? I'm sorry. We're saying that it was learning from them. So we have azharas for them. But where do we see that there's azhara b'chlal for a zar? We're trying to find out the source for a zar. We're saying that since there's also azhara on the zar not to do the avodah, but we didn't say azhara. Even v'nazru. If you're going to say that the azhara is from this pasuk of v'nazru, that the previous limud had learned it out, we're trying to learn a different limud now. We're saying the azhara is from that pasuk. Chil b'guf eksiv. Then what do we need this kavachaymer for? To tell you that not only is there azhara, but there's also it's mechalal the avodah. But it says in that pasuk, the end of the pasuk is lo yichalalu. So it's mashma that there is a chilul. So once you're learning using that pasuk as azhara, it also is going to be mechal. Ela mivzar lo yakav aleichem. We learn it from a different pasuk. Zar lo yakav aleichem. That tells you that a zar should not do the avodah, but it doesn't include a din that it's going to passel it. The Gemara says, maybe I'll tell you a kasha. What's the tzad hashava of balmum and tamei that they're not allowed by a bama? Which, as we're going to see, a zar can do the avodah by a bama, but these can't. And we're going to see. The Gemara is asking in a second, how do you know that they can't be done? That they're not hutter by a bama? So Gemara loy tema tamei yechiach. So Gemara says, let's switch it. It's not tamei and balmum. Elaima oinen yechiach. Let's prove it for oinen. Mala oinen. Affecting Gemara. Mala oinen chchein aser b'maisa. Someone who's a oinen is aser to. He's not allowed to eat meiser. Zak Gemara, which is zar can. Balmum yechiach. I'll prove from balmum. V'chazadin l'roizek roizeh atzad hashoshen shemuzharin. Both of them are muzar and oinen and a balmum cannot do the avodah, and if they do it, it's mechal. So too a zar. So Gemara hachanami lifrach malat tzadashav shechen shein lehutru b'bama. The Gemara says, let's ask the same question that both an oinen and a balmum are not hutru b'bama. Masha ein kain a zar is maskul of sama b'rei rava man leimel and oinen asa b'bama dil mashari b'bama. Where it says, listen, there obviously was a reason. The Rashi goes through in detail what, and we're going to see it later on what the svara was. But who told you that Einin is taka also bebama. Maybe he's mutter in the bama, so you don't have a tzara shava. You don't have a percha, I mean. So he says, so instead of using this kavachayim, he's going to say a different kavachayim. So we don't have a percha, so we're left that we are able to learn it out from Einin and Balmum. Is allowed to, he's allowed to, certainly a kohen who's sitting is allowed to eat the karbonis, the basar. Im Ovid chil, but if he does the avoida while he's sitting, he's mechalel the avoida. Zor she'ena oichel, Zor is not allowed to eat under any circumstance. Any dim shem avad chil, certainly he's going to be mechal. Mal yoshem pasal edus. Yoshev is pasal edus, and maybe that's the reason for the chumrah why he can't do the avoida. So Gemara Yoshev Talmud Chacham, bring you right from Talmud Yoshev Talmud Chacham is being Yoshev is still possible to do the avodah, and he's not allowed to, and he's allowed to say Eidah sitting, so you don't have that Kal V'Chomer. So Gemara, no, Mal Shem Yoshev Shem Pasal Eidas. Don't tell me about this specific case of the Talmud Chacham Yoshev. We have to look at the whole din of Yoshev. So there's an exception, but that doesn't change the fact that generally a Yoshev is Pasal Eidas, and that's a Chumrah of a Yoshev. So Gemara Shem Yoshev like parach. So you can't. He said the Gemara says no. We're not masking to that kasha that it's a Shem Yoshev. I'm talking about this specific case. V'imtim Salaim a parach, and if you'll insist that on your svara that Shem Yoshev, you could ask Asik mi Yoshev michad mehanach. You could learn it out with a Me'atzad with Yoshev and Balmum or a Einin or a Tameh. Mehanach v'Yoshev, the kosher b'mama. So yeah, the kosher. I'm sorry, the Yoshev. In fact, the kosher b'mama minalin. We said before that a zar is kosher b'mama. Where do we get that from? Amakron lamed lifnei Hashem l'sar lifnei Hashem v'lo lifnei bama. The Torah says that, I'm sorry, the Gabi Yoshev. Yoshev is only not asa b'mama. And it's mutter by Agama, because it says Lamed Livnei Hashem L'Sar, so you have to stand in front of Hashem to Misharis. That's what we know that Yoshev is Mechal, but Lo Livnei Bama, if it's in front of a Bama, you don't have the restriction of Yoshev. Okay, we'll stop over here. Shkayach for the extra time, but we are quite a bit behind.